need things out of the ordinary to wake us up. There are stakes in life that are higher, that if we fall asleep while we are here, we are going to miss something or mess something up, and we are meant to be awake and alive.
So I won't leave your side. No, I can't leave your side. Hey, now this is my desire. Consume me like a fire. 'Cause I just want something beautiful to touch me. And I know that I'm in reach. 'Cause I am down on my knees, waiting for something beautiful.
There will be times that we disagree with life. Pay attention to those, because they are going to be the pivot point for you on how you grow and how you make your life actually better.
What's up, TC? How you feeling? It's a little bit saucier in the 11:15. I like it. My name's Justin Chandler. I'm the family pastor here at The Crossing. So glad that you're here. Like Andrew mentioned during the announcement time, I, for one, am so glad that we have air conditioning. It was 91 in my house on Thursday. So when I rolled in this morning and I felt the cool breeze, it was way better than the ocean. So I'm stoked that we have the next 30 minutes or so just to be able to enjoy it together. And we are so glad that you're here. We're finishing up a series that we've been doing over the summer called Choose Your Own Adventure. And over the weeks of that, we've been given the opportunity to see the number of decisions that you and I are making that are going to significantly influence the future of our life. So whether you've been able to be here every week of the summer, or you've missed a couple, or potentially this is your first time at The Crossing, what I want to do is just to have a chance to recap in a really concise way the ground we've been able to I don't even know what I'm saying right now, the ground we've been able to make over the summertime. So here's what I'll do. We'll start in week one. Say yes was a way that Andrew framed the first week of our message, and he said every adventure that we have with God begins with an opportunity for us to say yes. And God invites us on this adventure, and he says, look what I have in store for you. Look what's ahead if you'll just say yes. In week two, Tim talked to us about parenting and said, the decisions we make right now as parents are going to influence the relationship we have with our kids when they leave our home. And every one of us has a choice and a chance today to be able to make the kind of decisions that will make that relationship last for years once they're gone. In week three, I had a chance to talk about forgiveness. And we said that we can't choose what happens to us, but we can choose how we respond. And if each one of us would make the choice to forgive today, that we would be set free of the burden and the weight that each one of us is carrying. In week four, Skylar talked to us about self-discovery and said, Jesus calls out the true and the very best version of who we are. That when Jesus looks at us, he doesn't see mistakes or failure or shortcomings. Jesus looks to us and says, here's the very best version of you, and I'm going to call that out. And the next week, Tim talked to us about serving and said one of the very best decisions any of us could make was to be able to give our lives away to serve other people. Not only are we going to grow most, but we're going to have a chance to see how our life and our way of saying yes to other people is going to significantly impact their life as well. After that, he talked about marriage in the next week and said, the kind of choices you and I make when we're dating are going to be the kind of decisions that help to influence the marriage that we'll have. And so Tim used hindsight to look back and say, in the 30 years that I've been married and the way that I've had a chance to be a pastor of this church, I've been able to see certain decisions that I made or that I should have made. Not only that, I've seen the decisions that other people have made that if they would have just done this differently, it could have had a potentially better outcome. After that, Andrew talked about who we will become. And he said there's a gap between who I want to be and who I am. And the way that we overcome that gap, that God gives us the ability to help bring that together. And so Andrew talked about overcoming the gap a couple weeks ago. And last week, Nicole talked about persistence and said that we're no longer going to sleepwalk through life. We're no longer going to just hope and find slow ways to die, but we're going to find great ways to live if we would take courage, if we would pray, and if we would repeat that. And so she shared that last week. If any of those, while I was just kind of recapping that really quick, sparked your interest and you said, oh man, I wish I would have caught that. If you go to thecrossing.com, there's a little space at the top right. It'll say media. And if you click on that, every one of the messages that we've shared during this series, you'll be able to find. You can jump on and be able to track along. And we'll go with that. So what we framed this series along is that there's 36,000 choices that you and I are gonna make today. And you could look at that and say, there's no way I'm making 36,000. But you made a series of choices on the way here that'll help to illuminate that. But let's imagine this. If you and I made the decision that we're gonna go to Disneyland today, right? Which we would have to evaluate, why am I making the decision to go to Disneyland today? It's the busiest time of the year. We should avoid that at all costs. But let's just play like, hey, we're gonna make that choice. We would have a series of decisions to make just on how to get there, right? That we could take, right now we could take the 55 to the 5 to get to Disneyland. You could take, I think, the 55 to the 22 to the 5 to get to Disneyland, or you could take the 55 to the 405 and then drive up Harbor in order to get to Disneyland. And all of those were a series of decisions around just how to get there. Now as we approach noon, every one of us is gonna start thinking, what am I gonna do for food after this, right? So some of you are already pre-processing that decision. So you have a couple to make on that. Are you gonna go home to eat? Are you gonna grab some takeout? Or are you gonna sit down, right? That's a series of decisions. You're gonna make decisions around the cuisine that you're gonna eat, right? What kind of food are you gonna consume? You could also make a decision right now, am I gonna go for an early afternoon snack plate, or am I gonna have a full meal? Now as a man, I'll be honest, I have not had snack plates more in my life until I got married. I didn't know what a snack plate was. We have meal plates, and then we have another meal. And then there's a meal plate and another meal. So my wife is like, would you like a snack plate? I'm curious. Why don't you wheel that out? And then I didn't think that was a whole meal. I just thought it's a snack plate, right? If we're gonna have a meal right now, we call that a meal plate. So you're gonna make a decision around that. Or as we approach the weekend, right? Holidays are one of those weird times that people choose to alter meal times. Like, hey, we're gonna eat at 3 o'clock today. We may eat again at 3 o'clock, but we've also got some lunch and dinner time meals we're gonna have to eat also. And all of that is just around food. So you can see, in a really easy way, we are gonna make a number of choices today. Now, most of those that I just discussed aren't gonna significantly impact your life. They're just gonna be things. But there are choices that you and I make that are gonna influence our future and the destiny that we're gonna have. And so here's what I'd love to do today as we start. I recognize you're gonna forget the majority of what I say today, but if you forget everything, I'd love for you to remember this one line that we'll throw up on the screen for you, and it's this one. The hardest choice is when we don't have any other. The hardest choice is when we don't have any other. I don't know about you, but I feel like the majority of conversations that I have right now, or the way that I'll hear people talk about it, is you'll hear this line, you left me with no choice. I didn't have any other choice to make. This was the only choice that we could make. And you'll hear people use extremes like that. The reality is that there are choices even when you don't feel like there are choices. And the reason is because we've been programmed to view choices in a series of ways that's called game theory. And we'll throw up the ways that it works like this. There are win-win choices, there are win-lose choices, and then there's lose-lose choices. And that's the simplest version of game theory. If you watch the movie Arrival, they introduced an expanded version of that, and it would be called a zero-sum choice. But every one of us has a chance to make choices. And so here's an easy scenario. Say you leave today and you're walking out to the parking structure. And as you get to the parking structure, you and the person walking next to you see two $100 bills lying on the floor. Now, a win-win version of that is you each grab a $100 bill, you each come away $100 richer, you give each other a high five, walk away, and say, this was the best church day of my life, right? Win-win. Now, what's a win-lose version of that? You see two $100 bills, you grab for it, strike the other person in the face, and run away. You win, they lose. What would be a lose-lose version of that? A lose-lose would be as you go to grab the $100 bills, a strong ocean gust knocks them away, and you literally have the chance to see $100 richer in front of you just be blown away by the winds. That's where you both look at each other sad, start to cry, and say, this is a lose-lose. Now, win-win choices are easy for most people, right? Because everybody comes away as a winner. Lose-lose choices for most people are easier than win-lose because at least in a lose-lose scenario, it's fair. So most people prefer lose-lose. Why? Because if you have a win-lose scenario, if you're on the losing end of that, you feel like that's the worst set of choices that could have happened. Why? Because I'm a loser and that person was a winner. This is the worst. And so most of us see choices like that, and we have a chance to see how all of those could kind of pile together. But what happens when you feel like you're at an impossible situation but no matter what choice you make, you feel like it's gonna be a negative outcome. This weekend is a really special weekend for me. It's my 1-year work anniversary here at the Crossing. Right? So, and you may say like, oh, that's nice for Justin. Here's what makes it even more special. It's the 1-year work anniversary for Andrew Brownback too, right? So let's show some love for Andrew. So 1 year ago, my family and I began serving here at the Crossing. It's been one of the greatest adventures of our life. And in true transplant fashion, like my wife grew up in Ventura County, so she's used to the ocean. I literally have never lived by the ocean in my life. So when we pulled our truck into our driveway, I said, load the kids up, we're going to the beach. And here's the very first picture we took living here in Orange County. It's our family at the beach. We literally watched the sunset on our first night living here. It's like, this is the coolest moment that's ever happened in history. And if you look at the back, there's a large swell that's coming in. My 4-year-old at the front is having a great time right then. In a matter of seconds, he's about to get wrecked by a wave, be tumbling and flipping through the sand. And as he comes up, he's like, I don't like the ocean. I don't like the ocean. Like he's got snot everywhere. It was just, it was a problem, right? And so we've since overcome them. Jesus is working in our lives, but he did that, right? So it was unbelievably cool. Now, here's how I arrived here last year. A couple weeks before this picture, I did a thing called Beach Camp where I flew into the airport. I drove to my son's school, got him registered to be able to start because once he got out here, he's going to start school the next week. So registered him. We drove a couple hours up to Ventura County, was at Beach Camp Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, drove down to LA on Friday, took a flight home from LAX, got to my house around midnight. On Saturday, woke up, packed our truck, realized we had too small of a truck, unpacked the truck, got the bigger truck, packed the truck again, and then said goodnight. And then on Sunday, we drove away from our home, and then we ended up here Wednesday night. So it was crazy, right? And that was my beach camp experience, and then we started into it the very next week. Here's something really cool I just want to show for this week because we just finished it. Beach Camp 2017 just concluded. So this is a picture of our junior high and high school students where we went to San Clemente. It was an unbelievable week. Here's the coolest part. In this picture, there's close to 50 students who were there. We had 15 of them say yes to Jesus during that week, which was just unbelievably cool. So there was a lot of people getting wrecked by waves. I actually had the leash of my surfboard cut between my pinky toe. It's been like nearly a disability the whole week, right? But so this was just such a cool thing. And it was crazy to me because I'm sitting here thinking a year ago, this all started. Like literally a year ago, I've been living the dream. Now, some of you would hear me say that and you would think that this is just like a nice, cute saying that Justin has when he greets people. But the reality is what's happening right now in this year is a story that God's been writing in my life over the last 5. And so I want to show you another picture. 5 years ago, we took this picture with my son Jude, and this is the first time that he went to the beach. Now, you can tell your boy's a transplant because he rolled up on the beach with some jeans and just decided to roll them up. I think in very non-California beach city fashion, wore a pair of tennis shoes and tucked my socks into those shoes and just carried them out. And my wife, looking at me lovingly is like, this guy's not from here, right? And yet I'm like, hey guys, what's got 2 thumbs and isn't from Orange County? The green shirt, right? So we have this. My wife had come out for a wedding, and so she had spent the early part of a week hanging out with some of her best friends, and so Jude and I ended up flying out late. And as we were flying, we flew right at bedtime, which as a parent, taking a flight at bedtime is the worst, because especially when you're beating time zones the whole way and you're racing the sun. But as we were landing at the airport, I can remember holding Jude on my chest, and I was sitting next to the window, and I looked out, and I could see all the lights of the metro areas we were landing. And so clearly, I remember God saying to me, I want you to move here and reach these people. I was like, what? Like I'm just holding this baby, and then I'm looking outside, and I was like, maybe that was just a weird thought because of dinner. And so I can remember, and we're flying, and then I still remember, it's just as clear as day. I want you to move here and reach these people. So I'm holding my son, we're like unloading the car seats, and I prepare like I'm deploying for war, and I just packed a kid to go to another state. And so as we get out, I see Rachel as we kind of ride down the escalator. I'm like, Rachel, I just had this weird experience on the plane where I feel like God just told me, I want you to move here and reach these people. And my wife loves Jesus, loves me, and if you heard that for the first time, you would respond like she did. She just looked at me and said, when you figure that out, let me know. And we hopped in the car and we started driving. So that thing just kind of sat there for a couple years. This idea that was in my head, this hope that was being delayed, but I can remember thinking, then God wants me to move here and reach these people. And if you land at LAX or Santa Ana, who knows where in the world those people are? But I knew somewhere in all these lights, there was a people that God was asking me to go spend my life with. And so a couple years later, I have just another moment with God that had far more significance, had way more impact, and it was this. I want you to quit your job, leave everything, and I want you to follow me. Now that statement has a lot more meaning than the other one. So I said, I'm gonna need a little bit more time on that. So we let it marinate. And then again, I can remember God saying, I want you to leave your job, quit, and follow me. And so I did what I find most males do when they're struggling at an impasse about making a decision. I told my wife I needed about 4 hours, and I went to the golf course. And so I went to the golf course, I started playing, and it's not like I had this magical golf round, right? It's not like I hit a hole-in-one every time. It's not like I had the best shot of my life. It's not like some random migrating birds flew overhead and they said yes and spelled it out in the sky. It was just, I was playing a round of golf. And so clear, over and over and over and over again. I felt like God was telling me, I want you to quit your job, leave everything and follow me. I want you to quit your job, leave everything and follow me. And it just kept coming. So I went home and I talked to Rachel and I said, Rach, I feel like God is telling me he wants me to quit my job, leave everything, and follow him. And she responded just like how you would. When you figure out what that means, let me know. And I said, hey, I don't think there's a time frame on this. I don't think there's a stamp that we've got to make this decision by a certain point. I just feel like God is telling me we got to do this. And if you look at the Bible and you start to study it, it's not that crazy of a statement to leave everything and follow Jesus. If we look at Luke chapter 5, verse 11, when Jesus calls his friends for the very first time, it says this, when they had brought their boats to land, they, being Simon Peter, Andrew, James, and John, they left everything and followed him. And in case you're wondering, like, what does everything there mean? It literally means everything. Jesus said, follow me, and they just dropped it all and went after him. A couple verses later in verse 28, it says this, that leaving everything, he, Levi, rose and followed him. And so I felt so compelled and so convinced that God was inviting us to do that, but I knew the implications were high. I'm a husband, I'm a father, this job is our primary income, it's where we have health insurance. What's gonna happen when we leave that? But like Andrew shared in week 1, I feel like God was inviting us on an adventure, and he was saying to us, see what I have in store for you. That yes, it's gonna be a risky decision. Yes, it's gonna involve everything. But the adventure that God invited us on was see what I have in store. And so Rachel and I just started to pray. We started to process. And I told her, when you and I come to a yes together, we'll know that it's that time. The hard part for us was a couple months later, something we couldn't have anticipated, something we couldn't have foreseen happened at the church that we were a part of. And it put us in what I would describe as a lose-lose scenario. Our choices, in a real summary version, where we could stay, but we would make a sacrifice against our integrity and our character, but we'd be able to stay. We'd have a job, we'd have health insurance, but we would stay. But in that, we would lose integrity and character. Or we could make the most risky decision, the most impactful decision of our entire lives, and we could leave. And that, to me, just felt like a lose-lose. Because it's true that the hardest choice is when we feel like we don't have any other. And Rachel and I sat in this moment where we felt like there's no other choice, like we literally have no choice to make. And in reality, we did. And so I told her, I was like, Rachel, I know what God said to me a couple years ago. I know what God has been speaking to us right now. I just feel like regardless of all the stuff that's been happening around us, we know the choice we need to make, so we just have to say yes. So we let our church know that. We dialogued through how we're going to transition out and how we're going to make that easy. And then we just began this process of not having a job. So in August of 2015, I began my first week of being unemployed since I started working. And what I wanted to do during that time frame is I wanted to write down all the times I spent with God, all the prayers I prayed, all the scriptures I read to remind myself in a moment. I just want to remember what God's been saying. And literally the first week that I was out of a job, I came across this passage that's been an anchor and a hope for me. And my prayer for today has been that it would be the same for you. So it's in Romans chapter 4. If you have a Bible, you can open up there. If you don't have a Bible, you can use the YouVersion Bible app that's available on each one of your app stores if you want to do that. If neither of those are appealing, you can follow along. We'll throw everything on the screen for you. So in Romans chapter 4, verse 18, it says it like this. In hope, he believed against hope, that he should become the father of many nations, as he had been told. So shall your offspring be. He did not weaken in faith when he considered his own body, which was as good as dead, since he was about 100 years old, or when he considered the barrenness of Sarah's womb. No unbelief made him waver concerning the promise of God, but he grew strong in his faith as he gave glory to God, fully convinced that God was able to do what he had promised. 2,000 years or thousands of years before this letter to the Romans was written, there was a man named Abraham. And God spoke to Abraham when he was 75 years old and said, you're going to be the father of a lot of nations, right? Like, you're going to birth a nation. That's a lot of people. Abraham, 25 years later, hadn't had a single son yet. So Abraham was in this space where for 25 years, God had promised something, and yet he was waiting on a promise over and over and over again. And you could be in the room today and feeling like something is happening, or you're struggling with faith and belief and wondering why circumstances are the way that they are. What I want to do over the next couple of minutes is just start to work through in a really easy way Romans chapter 4 and highlight a couple of statements that I would hope would be a great encouragement to you. So we're going to start right back up at the top. And the first phrase I want to highlight for you is this: in hope, he believed against hope. And I love the way the Bible said that. It could have said that statement in any number of ways. But the picture that I get when I read it, it's like there's this hope out there that I believe this thing is going to happen, but it's going to take hope to believe in hope. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, there's something that feels so far out that it's going to take me hope just to get hopeful. Against all hope, Abraham believed. And so even when the circumstances didn't seem like they were going to work, even when things didn't play out, it said that it took hope just to believe in hope. And he was believing hope against hope, that God was going to be able to fulfill it. And you could be in the place where you're saying, I'm struggling with hope. I'm struggling with believing that these things are going to work out better, that things are going to improve, that it is going to turn around. We've got this story of this guy that was waiting 25 years for that. And it says that he took this hope and this promise, and he said, I'm going to believe in hope for hope. I'm going to hold on to hope, even when it gets dark, even when it gets impossible, even when I walk through the hardest of days. This hope is going to carry me through the most difficult situations. And how would a person do that? How would a person hold on to hope in a way where it seems like hope is just being ripped from them? The verses continue on, and it says this. It says that he did not weaken in his faith. Now, whether you believe in Jesus or not, the idea of faith is really common to our culture. People will use faith to describe any number of things. So it can be connected to religion and Christianity, or it can be completely detached and say, I've got faith in a person, or I've got faith in this concept. And so really simply, here's what faith is. We'll throw it up on the screen as a definition. Faith is to believe in something that has no tangible proof, but to believe to the extent that you're willing to put your complete trust and to rely on it completely. That's what faith is. So if you look at something and say, there's no way that I can prove this absolutely, yet there's this thing in me that wants to believe in it, that wants to trust it, that wants to rely on it. That is faith. And whether, again, however you walked into the room today, every one of us is putting our faith in something. And what it says of Abraham is it says he did not weaken in his faith. He did not weaken in the fact that he believed in God and trusted in God and relied on God. His faith never weakened. He was able to hold on to that. One author, his name is Pete Greig, he puts it like this. I love the definition. He says, faith is a pair of open hands. Faith is our ability to open up our lives and trust and say, I don't know how this is going to work out, and I don't know where this is going to go, but I believe. I don't know where God is leading me, and I don't know how the dots connect, but I'm going to hold on to faith, to the thing that doesn't have proof yet. I'm going to trust and rely that I wasn't crazy. And it says of Abraham that he never weakened in his faith. There wasn't a moment where he didn't stop trusting and relying on God, no matter how much the proof stacked against him. And if you're 75 years old, 85 years old, 95 years old, and you're working on your first kid, it's gonna take a lot of trust, right? I'm 33, I have 2 sons. I'm exhausted right now. I can't imagine what it would be like to be a hundo and having your first baby, right? And this is where Abraham's at. And he's just saying, my life is my ability to say, like, I'm gonna trust him and I'm gonna rely on him. And if I had a kid at 100, my prayer would be the same thing. So here's how do you get to a place where you hope against hope, where your faith is so strong and it never gives up? He answers it in the next sentence. It says it like this: no unbelief made him waver. Now, I really want you to see this, because I think for some of us where we've been struggling with faith and belief has been around this statement. So Abraham's faith never changed. He completely trusted, he completely relied, and yet in order for him to have no unbelief, it meant there had to be moments where he didn't believe. So you can completely trust and completely rely on God and say, and yet I still don't know how this is gonna work out. I still don't know how we're gonna get from here to there. I trust you, I rely on you, because it's gonna take you to get there, but I can't see from here to there. That's the belief part. And it says of Abraham that no unbelief, no matter how much that mounted against him, no matter how old he got, no matter how old his wife got, no matter how much it looked like we're way too far away from this, it said no unbelief made him waver. If he was a ship, there was no part where he was turning like this. He was as steady as could be, no matter how much was coming his way. Why? Because he had this hope, and he believed against that hope that it was gonna work out, that his faith continued to grow strong, and no matter how many times he looked at the situation and said, I don't get it, I don't understand, it said none of that was gonna cause him to waver from the promise that God gave. And why I love the Bible is when you look at the people of the Bible, it brings situations like this to let us know they're real people who have real struggles and have real doubts, just like you and I are real people with real struggles and real doubts. There's a father who came up to Jesus and his son was sick. And Jesus was saying, like, I have the ability to heal your son. Do you believe it? And here's the father's response to Jesus in Mark 9. He said, I believe, help my unbelief. You've got this statement that's like, absolutely, I'm believing it. And yet I got this part of me that's going, I don't know how that's gonna work out. And the more we grow in our relationship with Jesus, we are gonna have days where we're like, I know absolutely what I believe. And yet A to B does not seem like it's gonna work out at all. And if you've been struggling with that, if you're having a moment where you don't believe, I want you to know that doesn't mean you lack faith, because you can have unbelievable trust and reliance and still struggle from A to B, and you still have faith. It's just moments where it's hard to believe. There's this song that came out and right when I read this verse, and one of the lyrics of this song said this. It says, faith makes a fool of what makes sense. And I love that line so much, because when I made the decision to quit our job and to leave everything, I can't tell you how many people, whether they love Jesus or not, with good intentions were like, you're making the worst decision of your life. Well, like, who as a grown man with a family says, I don't know where I'm gonna get work from, and I willingly say yes to that? Like, who makes that kind of choice? And so whether it was my parents who were entering into my life, or grandparents, in-laws, random friends who were like, we're concerned for you. Have you gone off the rails, right? Every one of that is good. But I had this thing in me that just said, I know what God said. And faith makes a fool of what makes sense. And what's crazy is I'm standing on this stage a year later, and I have a chance to say, the ability to hold on, to trust and rely, even when I and my wife, when we couldn't believe it, man, our faith, the trust and rely on God, makes a fool of all of that. Even when it doesn't make sense, faith will make a fool of that. So how could you hold on to hope? How could your faith grow? How could you be able to say, no unbelief is gonna make me waver? The next part of this sentence helps to illuminate it for us, and it says like this: because he grew strong in his faith as he gave glory to God. And so how does faith grow in the worst of circumstances? How does our trust and reliance, like if we looked at the definition of faith, and it says to believe in what we can't see, to believe in what has no tangible proof, to completely trust, to completely rely. How are we able to grow in that when the circumstances seem like they're far worse? And so one of the things that I would hope for us today would be this, that our belief increases as we remember what we believe. That our belief increases as we remember what we believe. In the book of Romans, a little bit earlier, one of the things that it would say is this, is that the same power that raised Jesus from the dead is alive in you and me. And it would also say that there's moments where we can believe and to ask God to help our unbelief. So as I've been talking, odds are there's like a situation in your brain that you're thinking of, that you're like, this is the thing that I'm struggling with. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to think of that situation. All of the implications of it, all of the stuff that makes you doubt, all of the things that make you worry, all the things that wake you up in the middle of the night because you don't know how A to B is gonna go. So I want you just to focus on that situation. I want you to think about it. And here's number 2. I want you to remember that Jesus rose from the dead. Jesus was dead. And he rose himself back from the dead. Like Jesus had a moment where he said, I'm done being dead now, and woke himself back up from the dead. And in unbelievable, like God of the universe fashion, It says when Jesus rose back from the dead, he took all of the clothes that they had buried him in and he folded them and put them back on the deathbed. I can't get a 6-year-old to make his bed. Jesus just came back from death and was like, let me fold my clothes real quick. Stone, get out of my face, right? Like Jesus rose from the dead. And what you just heard me say from the book of Romans, the promise for you and I is this, is that the same power that raised Jesus from the dead is alive in you and me. Not a quasi, semi, might raise you from the dead kind of version, but the very same power that caused Jesus to say, I'm done being dead now, and to overcome death is the very same power that's alive in you and me. So when you think about your situation and you remember Jesus rose from the dead and that very same power is alive in you, you can look at God and you can say, I believe, but would you help me? Help me how I can't see from A to be. Help me when I struggle to believe that it's really gonna work out the way that you said. I have complete trust, I have complete reliance, I know. But there's this struggle from A to B for me. Help my unbelief. The last person we wanna share with you today is this one. It says this, why could he hold on? Why could he keep a steady grip? Because he was fully convinced that God was able to do what he promised. So I don't know if God said something to you. I don't know if God has spoken to you. I don't know if you've had this moment where you believed in something. I want to say this, if God has ever given you a promise, be fully convinced that God can do what he promised you. I don't know how many years you've been waiting. I don't know how many years you've been holding on. I don't know what the situation has looked like, but I'm telling you, there's no one more trustworthy, no one more reliable, no one who sticks to the word and can come through no matter what the circumstances look like than the God who gave you that promise. And if God can do it for a 75-year-old Abraham to give him a promise and that when he turned 100, he would fulfill it, 25% of his life later, if God can do it in this guy who got a promise 5 years ago, who made the riskiest decision of his life 2 years ago, and who 1 year ago, nearly to the day, opened my eyes to the promise fulfilled. And I have literally been living the dream that God put in my heart 5 years ago every single day. If God can do that for me, I'm 100% certain God can do it for you. And so as we've started to dialogue and started to process through this, I feel like there's a couple of ways that you and I can respond and an invitation for us to say yes today. For some of you, as you've walked into the room, you've never said yes to Jesus. But today could be a day where you're like, if that's what faith looks like, if that's what belief looks like, then I'll say yes to that. For some of you, you've taken some time away from church, you gave up on your relationship with Jesus, but today's a comeback day for you. That God's welcoming you back home and you're starting your relationship with Jesus fresh and new today. We're gonna invite you to say yes to that. For some of you, you're just gonna say, I have faith. I'm just gonna open my hands to God today. Whether it's around your family, your friends, your finances, your job, it could be some sickness or disease that you've been dealing with, and you're just saying, I wanna open up my hands to trust God today. To completely trust, completely rely on him through this situation. We're gonna invite you to open up your hands in faith today. And the last group would be this, is if you feel like God gave you a promise and you're struggling to hold on. If you feel like God said something to you and it just doesn't look like it's gonna work out, I wanna invite you to believe again today. To believe in the God who said, I gave you this promise, and if God gave you the promise, then he's sure to fulfill it. So I'm not gonna invite you to stand. I'm just gonna have you kind of stay in your seats, and we'll just do this. I'm just gonna ask you to take a step of faith, a really bold decision, but I'm just gonna invite you to lift your hands. We're not gonna bow our heads, close our eyes, we're just gonna throw them up. And if you are in the room today, and if you wanna say yes to Jesus, whether this is you saying yes to Jesus for the first time, or you're saying, man, I'm coming back home. My relationship with Jesus is starting fresh today. I'd love for you to lift your hands up because I want to be able to pray for you. So if you're saying yes to Jesus today, either for the first time or again, could you just slow your hand up real high? I want to be able to pray for you. And thanks so much for lifting your hands. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you for lifting your hands. Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. If you're in the room today, and you're saying, I just want to believe again. I want to have faith again. And I'm just going to open my hands to God, whether it's around your finances, your job, your family, your friends, or some sickness or disease. If you're just saying, I'm going to open my hands and trust and rely on God through this thing, I'm going to believe it. If you want to throw your hands up high real too, because I want to pray for you. Yeah, thank you so much, those of you who are lifting your hands. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. to the last group of people, if you feel like a promise is just slipping out of your hands and you're just saying, I want to renew my trust and completely believe that God is going to fulfill what he said, and you just want this to be an act of faith for you to say, I still believe and I'm going to still hold on. Would you throw your hand up real high too, because I'm going to pray for you? Awesome. Yeah, thanks for you lifting your hands. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so here's one of the things I want to invite you to do. One of these cards is available inside of your bulletin. It says say yes, and there's some portions on there that you could fill out and just kind of let us know the decision. I'll let you know. I personally want to know so I can have a chance to pray with you. If we meet at Guest Connect or something like that, I would love to do that. And we're going to take a moment to pray here at the end of our service, but there's something really special for us today. That every one of our responses to that was us being able to respond back to hope and God encouraging us. But we have a really great opportunity today that our church has an opportunity, whether you believe in Jesus or not, to extend hope to a group of people who really need it. And Andrew's going to share a little bit more about that.
Thanks, Justin. So in a second, we're going to take our second offering. And if you've been around church for years, back in the old days, there would be this phrase anytime a church took a second offering. And they'd say, we're going to take a love offering. Now, we don't use that phrase very often anymore, but really the heartbeat behind that was this, is that it's easy to tell someone you care about them. It's easy to tell someone you're going to pray for them. It's easy even to tell someone you're going to love them. But what really matters is, do your actions reflect it? And so when we take a second offering, this is our chance to say, you matter to us. You know, if you've been around the crossing for a while, you know one of our core beliefs is that God loves all people. And you heard Justin share about it. He shows it through his actions. And so today we're going to have an opportunity to respond and serve someone in need. And I don't know the process you go through whenever you consider giving. I can tell you what my wife and I do is we start thinking about it, we start talking about a number, and one of the things I specifically do is I start thinking about what impact is this gonna make in someone's life. And I'll tell you, friends, there is someone in our country today who is wondering, does anyone care? Is there any hope for someone like me? And today we have a chance to respond with love because God loves us so. And so in a second, our guest hosts are gonna come down front and they're gonna receive this offering. If you are prepared with cash or check, you can put them right in the offering plates. I know some of you aren't prepared and you wanna give. And I'll tell you, one of the ways you can give is you can go to this website right here, tcgive.com. You can pull out your phone now, you can type that in to the browser, and you can enter your credit card in, or you can make a donation here today. I'll tell you, do it today. Don't leave this room before you respond. And as a church, we're gonna match every dollar given. Every dollar given, we're gonna match. And as our guest hosts, as they come forward here in a second, Michael's gonna play a song over us. And so as a chance for us to respond and reflect on Justin's message, on this opportunity to give, there is this little phrase in this song. And this little phrase you're gonna hear Michael sing a couple times. It's just simply, he gives hope. That God gives hope. God provides hope. And how does God often provide hope for people? I'll tell you, the number one way God provides hope is through people like you and me. People who are called and commit to respond. So I want to thank you for your generosity. I want to thank you for being here today. I want to thank you for being someone who is open to God's leading in your heart. Guest host, if you want to come down front and receive the offering now, Michael, will you play for us?
You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you bring hope. You restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so
Justin read this verse a little while ago. Romans 4:18 says this. It says, in hope, he believed against hope. And I'll tell you, the core of the Christian faith, the core in our belief in God is there is a God who provides hope for people in Texas, for people in Costa Mesa, for people around the world. And what I want to tell you today is I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you for being open to God's work in your life, in your family, in your community, and around the globe. So can we stand for closing prayer? And so God, as we wrap up today, here's our prayer. God, first, I pray for every single person who raised their hand a few minutes ago. Every person who says they're coming back to you, or they want to experience the hope that you offer in their day-to-day life. God, I want to pray for every single person who's going through a difficulty or a trial or a struggle in their life right now, and they wonder, is this ever going to end? God, bring hope. And God, I pray for those suffering, those without a home, those without food or water. God, bring hope to them. God, I thank you for letting us be part of a place that is committed to doing our part to bring hope. God, we love you so much. We love you so much, God. And we pray this in your son's name. Everyone said, amen. Well, thanks for being here, everyone. So glad you decided to spend part of your Sunday with us. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next weekend as we have Ready Sunday and kick off a brand new series. Take care, everybody.